Welcome to the Preserve What You Love podcast, presented by Wise River and hosted by the Breaker Bros. Today, we are very excited to introduce our special guest, Chris Pandolfi. Chris, if you don't mind, let's just start with kind of a brief introduction, who you are and, what it is you do on a daily basis.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, first of all, and congratulations on this new venture. As I said earlier, I'm a podcaster myself, so I know the kind of time and energy that goes into this kind of thing, but I dig what you guys are doing. I am first and foremost a musician. I'm the banjo player and founding member of the Infamous Stringdusters, and I've been doing that for, 16 or so years. And that is my profession. I work also as a studio musician, a producer, release some music under my own name, and I do some work sort of in the bigger music community, with bluegrass and helping young artists and things like that. So that takes up most of my time, but I'm also a very passionate outdoorsman and very passionate fly fisherman and conservationist. And it's been really cool over the years to see how all of these different paths have intersected, and now at this point in my career afforded me the opportunity to use the platform that I have to hopefully make some difference with regard to conservation and preserving the natural world, because that is a very, very important thing these days, as you guys both know, getting more important as time passes. So yeah, that's what I do. That's what I spend most of my time on. I'm based in Denver, Colorado, which is a great place for both those things.
Awesome, Chris. We are so happy to have you on, and we think you kind of embody everything that goes into the Wise River brand. So we couldn't imagine a better person to be on here. Diving or going back a little bit further in your life, can you outline when it was that you started getting into the outdoor space or recreation? What was kind of that triggering moment for you?
Yeah, I was so lucky because my father, who is also a very passionate fly fisherman and conservationist, introduced us to these things at a very young age. And when we were growing up in the suburbs outside New York City, my parents leased a log cabin, no electricity, propane stoves, kerosene lamps in upstate New York on the Neversink River. And it was one of these 5 super rustic little cabins that was part of a thing called the Big Bend Club. And it's so incredible to reflect on the influence that had on my life, not only in terms of how it introduced me to the outdoors and really got that passion going, that awareness for how big this was for me and how much it meant to me. But it also, I think, is also a big part of what led me to take on all of these creative pursuits, because we would go up to this place on the weekends and escape the hustle and bustle of New York City and everything that surrounds, and just be free, free to think, free to be creative and weird, my brothers and I, and explore, and just, it was really a time of discovery like no other. And my father, Francis Pandolfi, is a very cool guy, and he had an amazing career. He worked in the outdoor recreation publishing space, working for Times Mirror magazines for years, and so they were doing, Field and Stream, Outdoor Life, Saltwater Sportsman, these kinds of things. And he left that job to become chief of staff of the U.S. Forest Service toward the end of his career, which is so admirable, I think, because he brought all of his experience in business to try and help this really crucial government organization run better. And he also wrote a book about how NGOs can be more successful on a business front. So again, trying to take some of these lessons that he's learned in the business space and apply them to groups that are trying to do good, and even more specifically trying to do good for the environment. Because a lot of times, the idea is there, the intention is there, but to actually be successful and actually make a difference can be quite difficult. So I really looked up to my dad, still do in many ways, and he got us into fly fishing. We were tying flies when we were little kids and exploring this unbelievable river with him, and it just really got something going that resonated very deeply. And now, many years later, we've fished all over the world and been lucky to go on some incredible trips with him. But that was what got it going, and like I said, it was something that really stuck and has continued to be a passion for me. I want to fish more every day, that more than the day before. So it's only getting stronger, and it's a really cool thing. It's something that I love very much.
That's a pretty incredible backstory there, and it's so cool to hear that you have these supportive parents that you can kind of look up to, especially that made it a point to kind of connect you guys to the outdoors. And I feel like that's a common thread I see amongst a lot of people who are very passionate about conservation and the outdoors. And kind of a major theme of, what we're hoping to talk about today is that idea of, you're not going to conserve what you don't love, and you're not going to love what you don't understand. So to even just to hear your brief stories about your family being up in New York, without service, just being weird and playing in the woods, like that's, I know Andrew's smirking because that's something we can resonate with, especially on the weird side of things.
That supportive energy, not just in terms of these outdoor pursuits, but my career in music. I don't think that they expected me to call them, when I was getting my undergrad degree and say, hey, I want to go to music school. And then what's the next step after that? And it was sort of this leap into the unknown, but their support there was huge. And with a lot of the outdoor stuff, it was never something that was pushed on us. It was never something that we were dragged along to do. It was much more of like a check this out and see how amazing it is with your own two eyes, and let's turn these rocks over and see what's there, and look at this fish, and here's how you tie these flies. And it was that kind of introduction that opened the door for myself, and especially my older brother Jono, to find the things that we loved inside of that activity, inside of that world. And that, I think, is the type of support that really leads people places, and something that I felt very strongly from both of my parents. My mom, by the way, great fly fisherman too. Not necessarily as active as my dad, but it was something that we all did when we were younger, and it was just like part of life, and I'm so grateful for that.
That sounds like an awesome childhood, and like Eric said, we can relate on many levels. So jumping into modern day, and one question that we like to ask all of our visitors here on the podcast is, if you had to choose one activity, one outdoor recreation activity to do for the rest of your life, what would it be?
And also, we know that that's not a fair question, so I just wanted to mention that.
There are a lot of activities in the great outdoors that I'm passionate about, but again, fly fishing is my thing, and lately especially, I'm really into saltwater fly fishing. I'm heading down to the Bahamas in May. Not exactly sure when this will air, but going bone fishing on South Andros with some good friends. And yeah, it's just something that I love so much, and it's the experience of it. Catching an amazing fish is the icing on the cake, but fly fishing, especially DIY fly fishing, figuring out zones for yourself and learning to tie flies and understanding these different watersheds, and really sort of gaining that mastery, that expertise that is a very long arcing thing. It's so much bigger than just that moment where you're out there standing in a stream or wherever you are casting to these fish. It's really a bigger understanding of the environment, sometimes the entomology, the tides, whatever it is. There's so many different factors that go into it, that it's this incredibly unique scientific puzzle almost. It's really like a problem solving situation, and it's combined ultimately with this incredible awe-inspiring element of seeing these fish in their natural habitat. You know, I've become a big steelhead fisherman in recent years, and I can think of truly nothing more inspiring. I'm, getting goosebumps just talking about it, than seeing a big wild steelhead in, 600 CFS river, hundreds of miles inshore, this ocean creature that is just so majestic, not a scale out of place. And it's really, to me, that's like the closest thing I've got to religion or, spirituality, whatever you want to call it. It's that moment that really helps you sort of tap into the idea that there are deeper forces at play than just the things that we do to keep ourselves busy. I mean, we all lead busy lives, but that's a big part of why I think that I stay very tuned into those pursuits, because they make you feel very alive. They make you feel very, very connected to everything else that's out there. And those are important skills to then draw from and sort of extrapolate out to the rest of your life. So, I mean, I could go on and on, but that's just one example of how big a role it can play in your life, and how it has really a much deeper meaning than just what's on the end of my line, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think you just kind of answered this to a degree for sure. But I've had a couple people in my personal life recently who, aren't necessarily classified as quote unquote outdoorsy people, or don't necessarily understand fishing. And they've asked me kind of like, just they're almost dumbfounded, like they don't understand the point of catching and releasing a fish.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious to hear your answer. Like there's some people out there that think we're all psychopaths, just messing with fish and then like throwing them back in. Like why is that something you love to do so much?
Well, it's going to be impossible, right, to explain what it is to someone who doesn't innately understand that, who doesn't have an appreciation. I don't think they necessarily need to be someone who is an avid fisherman, but just being out there again, I come back to this idea that fishing to me is this combination of problem solving and also communing with nature. And so, for someone like me, those are two things that I really love. I love a challenge, and I love what I see and hear and feel and experience in all of these incredible places that fly fishing has taken me, from, upstate New York to rivers in Colorado to the Bolivian Amazon to the Florida Keys, all of these incredible places. The more of that you experience, the more of that feeling that you get. And then I think in turn, for me, the more ability you have to go out and share that with the world. Not just the fact that there are these amazing places out there, but that there is something, again, deeper at play, and there's a sense of interconnectedness that I know has helped me become a more content person in my daily life. So it's sort of connecting all of those dots, and that's how I look at it as I get a little bit older. But I can't recommend it highly enough to anyone, just to get out there for a hike, see the leaves changing in the fall, whatever it is, try to find that thing that gets that spark going, because ultimately it's going to be so much bigger than that specific activity. And I think that it can really help you in the rest of your life, just to be a more settled person and to have a better perspective on what's important out there. And those are, those are big things for me that I seek out in all of those pursuits, and also in my daily life. So it's a big sort of package deal, and hard to explain to someone, but you gotta trust me, it's out there.
I think that was the best response for why to catch and release fish ever. It's a difficult topic.
Yeah, that was beautiful, and I wish you could kind of just take something like that and condense it into a one word response for those people that ask you, why the hell you do that.
I've heard a I heard a quote. I think it was in the fly fishing film tour either last year or the year before. One of the films had a quote that said, "We may be something to the effect of we may be catching or like playing with these fish, but we are also checking in on them." And it's like and that's getting at the fact that yes, we do catch fish, and it may seem inhumane at times in an odd, way, but through fishing, we become like the biggest supporters of fisheries and of ecosystems, uh, and nature. And I,
Absolutely.
I
I mean,
really like that approach.
yeah, that's undeniable. And, you can't really explain or justify the fighting a fish part. That's just part of what you're out there doing. But I'm really more interested in visiting with this creature for a minute, handling it properly, you know, doing the catch and release thing, and keeping the resource going, and even doing one better than that and supporting the resource, because what you just said is so true. Fly fishermen, hunters, these are often the biggest conservationists and the people who put the most energy toward preserving this resource. And I know that that I definitely fall into that category for sure.
So that segues us perfectly into the next question, which is kind of at the heart, of the theme of this podcast, and that is, what are some ways, either big or small, that you personally preserve fly fishing or work to help preserve it?
Yeah, I think there are the things that you do out there on the day, like um pinching your barbs, catch and release, like you mentioned, making sure that you're keeping an eye on water temperatures, and really putting the fish as a priority and their well-being as a priority ahead of everything else. And so those, those are important things on the day that you go out and fish. I am a member of Trout Unlimited. I'm a member of the Bonefish and Tarpon Trust, which are both great groups that have done incredible, groundbreaking research and also numerous projects all over the place to restore rivers. TU restored has restored a number of rivers here in Colorado, and even like urban fisheries. And I love to carp fish on the South Platte. Now, I'm not any good at it yet because that is a really hard fish to catch. But I think of all the different projects that they've done here, and the fact that I will go and fish on those streams, and I don't take that lightly. So I support both of those organizations. We, the String Dusters, have done some very cool things, including a tour we did some years ago called the American Rivers Tour, where we teamed up with American Rivers. We teamed up with Patagonia and a couple other brands, Keen, that all have put meaningful time, energy, resources toward conservation. And we would actually go, when we played in Boise, we went and did a river cleanup with our fans that afternoon, and spent a few hours with, some SUPs and a bunch of trash bags, and just cleaned these resources up, just to try and set an example of what can be done, of the community that surrounds those activities, and the fact that it's so much more than just like ticking this thing off a list and a few hours out of your day. Once you tune into the bigger meaning of these acts, and that does tie to an appreciation of nature that I think you also need to cultivate, that becomes time well spent. I mean, that's becomes time that really feeds you. And I think doing good, is not something that's focused on enough in our world these days. This extends far beyond the boundaries of conservation, but just getting out there and doing the right thing and doing it with other people. So those are some of the things. And then last season on my podcast, I host a podcast called Inside the Musician's Brain, and it's a music podcast. Now I'm going into my 4th season now. And so there's, many episodes that you can check out. And last season, in season 3, I had Orvis as an official sponsor. And we did some cool conservation initiatives, including trying to connect with Governor Inslee in Washington State to speak out on behalf of removing the lower Snake River dams. And that initiative has, as of recently, been passed. There's still work to do before those dams are removed, but that's a huge and very tangible challenge facing anadromous fish populations, especially in the Pacific Northwest. And these dams don't necessarily do anything anymore, but removing them, there's incredible body of scientific proof that shows that when you remove these dams, the river reclaims its territory actually very quickly, and fish populations will begin spawning in that water again. So, but the dangers, the challenges that it poses to these fish, including water temperature and decreased flows, and so they don't have their bearing in these rivers, and then the inability to go spawn and follow this incredible thing that can't be explained in their genetic code, this like intuitive connection with nature. Like, you really don't want to mess with those things. And dams, though they do have a time and a place, there are too many of them, and too many of them are obsolete. So we ran 10 spots last season on my podcast, and I was just using a simple call to action. And I know every time I released an episode, I went myself and sent an email to Inslee saying, I'm speaking out in favor of removing lower Snake dams. And that for me was really cool. I don't know how much of a difference it made, but again, there's a lot of crossover between our fan base and the outdoor world. There's a lot of people in our fan base who really care about the outdoors. So it was a meaningful sponsor in Orvis, which is a very cool company that I've gotten to know in recent years. And also, they've done incredible things in the field of conservation. But to have something to tie it all together and to speak out on behalf of something that I care about, to do some good, that was a really cool thing for me to be a part of. So those are some of the things that I've done, and I'm always looking for new avenues and new ways to support and to be active on that front, because the reality is, in this day and age, if you care at all about the outdoors and you take advantage of that resource and you use it and you enjoy it, you need to be doing things to protect it. It's not a question anymore. And everyone, even people who get outside for a hike, and it could be something as small as picking up trash along the way or donating to an organization that you like, but you need to get out there and do something on behalf of that resource. It's more critical than ever, and those are some of the things that I've done.
That's awesome. You truly embody the preserve what you love mindset, and I love that it's going beyond yourself, and now you're applying it to your music and your band, and you're using that level of influence to drive it even further. I think that's awesome.
I just wanted to hop in too, before you move on, to compliment you with, it's a similar statement. I'm just very impressed with how you're able to take all these pieces of your life and kind of, they almost feel like they all still fit under that same umbrella and that kind of same mission you have of conservation. So like, I didn't know you were just a, Grammy winning musician, but you're also an avid outdoorsman, fly angler, and a serious conservationist. And it's inspiring for me as someone who's like actively trying to pull pieces of my life together and like push them towards one common goal. But that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that. I when I set out to have a career in music, like 99% of bands or artists out there, for the first 10 years, I was broke. I had nothing, like I didn't even own a pair of skis. I had one 4-piece 6-weight rod that I used to fish for the tiniest trout or a 10-pound snook, and it was a long road of sort of establishing myself in my career. But really a blessing in disguise and not something that I necessarily anticipated. This connection between our fans, our music, the type of people that it appeals to, and the outdoors. There's a very, very tangible connection there, and you see it in all these different marketing initiatives. So it's something that really makes sense and something that our fans care about. So that there's been a very natural tie-in there, and again, that's just something that I didn't necessarily anticipate, but it's been a really cool element of my career, a cool kind of full circle part of all of this.
As much as we could just continue on this conversation, I think I'm gonna try hopping into the next topic, which is
Great.
Talking about wacky, funny, crazy experiences that you've had out when you're fly fishing.
I thought about this before the call because there's too many good stories. I mean, if you're a fisherman, you have stories all day long. But one really comes to mind. I was getting into steelhead fishing, and this is probably 6-7 years ago. My really good friend Harrison Buck called me up and he said, "Hey, I've got to hook up with this guide who's hired me to do some photo video stuff for his guiding operation up in the Pacific Northwest." Troy Detman is his name, on the Grand Ronde River, which is one of my favorite rivers now. I've floated it multiple times. So he invited me up on this trip, and I really haven't had an experience like this where I had no idea what I was getting into, and neither did Harrison. And so we show up, and we just sort of assumed we were going to have a guide at least rowing a boat. And this guy, Troy, who is a really cool dude, but definitely sort of a freewheeler, we get to the river and we sleep on the riverbank the night before the trip. And then we get to the river and he's like, "All right, this is you guys. Here you go. Here's your boat." Neither of us have much, if any, experience on the oars. And the three other boats, the two guides with clients and then the sweep boat with the gear, they all take off. And here we are, just green as can be. And we take off, and 5 minutes into the float, we are high siding on this rock. Nothing is lashed down. And I mean, we got a crash course lesson in what it means to be on a boat, on a river, and do it properly. We dodged a bullet. We got our act together. And I asked the guides, I said, I don't want to step on your guys' toes. I know there's paying clients here. I'm here to help Harrison and help him with his gear, and he needs someone to fish. And they said, "Hey, no problem. Just if you see us set up in a steelhead run, just don't fish that until we're done or whatever." And, great, no problem. So that same day, we get our act together. We roll into camp. We're feeling pretty disheveled. We're feeling like, man, we gotta get it together. And the clients fish this big, beautiful, deep steelhead run. They don't catch anything. And I drop in there, and about 5 minutes in, on a 13-foot 6-weight spey rod, I land my first the first wild steelhead that I had ever caught on the swing. And I count that as one of my top 10 fish I've ever caught in my life, and I can still picture it perfectly in the water, because you don't even take those fish out of the water, and the guides are really serious about that. But it was a great trip of kind of calamity and trial by fire, and then ultimately a really, really special fish, and that got me hooked on spey fishing for steelhead forever.
Wow. You being in the trenches and coming up and being on top of the world in a matter of, that was a 2-day difference there?
That was all in the same day, I believe.
Oh, the same day.
Same day. I mean, 1 minute we're fishing stuff out of the river. The next minute, I'm pulling a perfect little, the spey flies are small, this little purple and black streamer out of this fish's mouth. And I had never seen anything like it. I mean, a steelhead is a rainbow trout, but they look different and they feel different. They act different. And when you see them in that environment, oh man, that's one of the most incredible experiences of my life for sure.
Eric and I have never caught a steelhead before, but we've heard plenty of people talk about it as if it's a spiritual experience. Is that I have a feeling you're going to recommend us to go steelheading, but is it your favorite species to target?
It's up there. I think tarpon is my favorite species to target. Um, Tarpon are just these rare prehistoric beasts, and they live in an environment that these days I'm really, really into. But steelhead are right up there. I mean, I caught. I went back some years later and caught my first big wild steelhead on the swing. 40-inch plus, gigantic female, and you see this fish that looks like it should be in the ocean because that's where it has built up all this size and strength. And it's like, it reminds me of like if you've ever caught like an albacore or a tuna and you get the fish in your hands and it's the most solid feeling thing, like you can't even really like push the skin in because they're just they're so solid. And a trout, which is another great species that I love, you can catch some really amazing robust trout, but a lot of trout that live in a river their whole life, they're not this jacked up fish. They're beautiful and they're very elegant, but steelhead is like this incredible cross section of the beauty of a trout with the power and the size of an ocean going fish. And then you see them in a river environment, and that, I think that's, if I had one place to fish the rest of my life, it would be a river somewhere. And it's just a really dynamic, cool environment. But they're like outsizing this incredible environment. And it's a very inspirational thing. So yes, I would recommend that you go check it out, but I would give you a warning that it is a low numbers game. It's true, but if you're really into it, it just adds to the mystique. And then ultimately when you get one on the line, as you guys know, something that you've really put in the time. And when I caught that wild one, it was on a fly that I tied, and all of these different points of connection. It really makes for an incredible experience.
Okay, Chris, fine. We will just have to go steal with you.
And
If
you can, we'll bring you, and you can be on the oars because you have the
Okay.
experience now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was gonna joke that I feel like a lot of these, I guess, crazy or funny stories with people that fly fish have the common theme of a boat in some rapids is what I've noticed, which makes a lot of sense. And again, we could keep talking forever about this. But to kind of go towards our last question, and this may be something we don't even include because I think you've answered it just about 10 different ways already. But that is, why should other people care about fly fishing?
Well, I think fly fishing is one part, and if that's something that lights you up, then great. But I think that everyone needs to care about conservation. And I think that it's not just about preserving this natural resource. I mean, that is a big part of it. But what we're actually preserving is some inspirational, some spiritual quality out there in the natural world that we simply cannot afford to lose. And if we humans, as we sort of continue on with this whole societal experiment, if all we do is continue to overuse that resource and cordon ourselves off from that resource, I think that's a huge mistake. I think that's a huge mistake, especially for young people who need access to this, because I know that the impact that it had on my life, and not just on my life as an outdoorsman. As I said earlier, I really think it's a big part of what inspired me to be creative and express myself, and to know that there is this thing out there. It's the closest thing to magic that there is. And there are all these connections between music, which really holds a lot of those qualities too. I mean, how can you explain what's going on when 5 people are creating music and having this transcendent moment with all these people in the audience? I mean, it truly defies explanation. And, the same thing is true for why a salmon knows to find its way to this remote creek to reproduce, or the feeling that you get when you see and hold a fish like that in your hands. To me, those are some deep, deep levels of inspiration and spirituality that we really can't afford to lose. So if you're someone who cares about that or cares about nature or cares about anything really, you need to be at least thinking about doing your part, no matter how small, to look to the future, preserve that resource, think about people other than yourselves, and keep that thing going.
Beautiful answer. Chris, before we head out, do you want to name drop any social tags or websites, upcoming events, anything you want people to know about?
Yeah, you can check out, my fly fishing music podcast exploits on my social media, and I'm Trad Plus, TRADPLUS on Instagram. And you can check out thestringdusters.com for a full list of tour dates. We make the rounds, and I bet we're coming somewhere near you pretty soon. We have a busy schedule this upcoming summer, so lots of action in both of those places and lots of cool things to check out there.
Well, we can't tell you how much we appreciate you joining us here. And we got two things to do now. One is seeing the String Dusters live, and the other is going steelhead fishing. So thank you.
Well,
Thank you for this.
seeing the string dusters is going to be a hell of a lot easier than getting out there and catching the steelhead. But everybody would be doing it if it was easy. So, when you guys need some intel on how that whole game unfolds, you let me know.
We appreciate that. All right. Thanks again, Chris.